One idea with these basic exercises, like learning to feel the diaphragm and transverse abdominis when you're doing belly breathing, learning to feel the intercostals when you're doing costal breathing, or even learning to feel and activate the spinal erectors, is not that you're trying to consciously control them all the time. It's like learning to drive a car. Maybe you learn how to use the brakes, and then when you're actually driving, once you've had enough practice, you don't have to think about how to use the brakes. You just use the brakes automatically as a reaction to or response to what's happening all around you. And if you want to speed up, you don't think, okay, I have to press the accelerator. You just do it automatically, and then you increase your speed as a result. The same can happen if you learn how to use the spinal erectors to bend your spine backwards. If you learn how to use them to bend your lumbar spine backwards, your thoracic spine backwards, and you also learn how to use the thoracic spinal erectors to open the rib cage in combination with the intercostals. All of those then become second nature. You don't have to think about it. You just think, okay, I want to open up my rib cage, and it happens naturally because you've practiced them in isolation. Likewise with the breathing. If you're doing a more challenging pose, which you're not used to or you find difficult, the breathing becomes second nature. You can focus on things other than the breathing, controlling your body and letting the breathing happen naturally, or you can focus on the breathing and letting the other parts of the pose happen naturally. Ironically, one of the things that I don't focus on much, even in beginners classes, is breathing. Instead, what I focus on is actual breathing movements without talking about the breath. So I'll talk about bend your spine backwards, bend your spine forwards, and I'll actually have my students do it slowly and smoothly without ever talking about whether it's an inhale happening or an exhale. And the idea is to train the muscles that move the spine so that they get better at controlling their spine and the rib cage and even their abdomen. And from there, a general exercise that I then teach or focus on is one of lengthening and relaxing. And one of the reasons that I start with a spinal back bend and a relaxation action is because it helps people to feel the rib cage as well as the spine. And then from there, it's easy to feel, once you've learned a back bend and the opposite movement of forward bend, you can put your awareness in your rib cage. You can then feel your ribs moving away from the front of your pelvis as you back bend, and you can feel them moving towards your pelvis as you front bend. That can be also thought of as you focus on the abs, lengthening the abs and then shortening the abs but keeping them relaxed. Now, a next movement from there is to expand the awareness of the rib cage. So it's generally pretty easy to feel the front ribs. I'm sure most people have that idea or that notion, that ability. So going back to the lifting the chest and lowering it, once that is relatively smooth, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just, can you feel the action? Can you do it with some semblance of control? Then from there you can work on expanding your awareness to feeling the sides of the rib cage. I'll say side ribs, but really it's the sides of the ribs, or sides of the rib cage. So once you can feel your front ribs lifting, and it's a lifting feeling, but it could also be an expanding feeling, like if your fingers were ribs, it'd be like your fingers were moving away from each other. The ribs don't actually move away from each other. It's the change in shape of the rib cage, which makes the spaces slightly bigger. Something like that anyway, but it can feel like the rib cage is expanding. It's actually the ribs sliding with respect to each other that changes the tension in the tissue between the ribs. So what you can do while lifting the rib cage and lowering it is focus on feeling the fronts of the ribs lift and lower, expand and relax. And then you can try and expand that feeling to the sides of the rib cage. And movement may change slightly, but the idea is to not just feel the front ribs, but also to feel the side ribs. So you could feel the front rib cage, try to feel the side ribs expanding, lifting as well, and then relax. And the bigger you make the movement, oftentimes I'll get people who just do like this and then like this. It's a bit harder to feel. So if you make the move more maximal, so lift the rib cage and then sink it down, keep sinking it down. So you're really bending your thoracic spine forwards and then bending it backwards, so you're opening the rib cage. The bigger you make the movement, the easier it is to feel your ribs and your spine. And then the easier it is to feel your side ribs. So you lift the front ribs and then you can start to feel the side ribs lifting and then relax. And with the side ribs, with the lower part of the rib cage, what actually happens is the side ribs expand outwards. So maybe with your arms around the sides, I've seen people wrap a towel around them and then try to expand the towel and then relax, expand the towel, relax, whatever. But you could just put your hands on your lower ribs, lower side ribs, lift and relax, and try to lift your ribs. So then move away from the pelvis and relax. So that's something you can experiment. You could maybe try, if you actually bend your spine forward, your thoracic spine forward, you may find it easier to expand the side ribs and then relax, expand and relax. So change with different shapes of the thoracic spine, to bend backwards or bend forward. See if it makes it easier to feel your side ribs. Then from there, I hope the obvious conclusion is learning to feel the backs of your ribs as well, right around here. And this was actually something I used to focus on a lot, lifting the back ribs and lowering or lifting the backs of the ribs. But generally the exercise is the same. Once you can feel your side ribs, expand your awareness to include the back ribs as well. And here again, change the position of your spine. If you're having difficulty trying it with the spine bent backwards, and with the spine bent backwards, you could try chest, side ribs, back ribs, relax. If that's too difficult, try it with the spine bent forward. Chest, side ribs, back ribs, and relax. And actually one exercise, if you're doing locust, you may find it easier. If you can activate your spine erector. So if you do a spinal back bend, so lumbar spine, thoracic spine, both bent backwards. And if you can feel your spinal erectors contracting, the muscles that actually pull up on the ribs at the back of the body are pretty close to the spinal erectors. So if you activate the spinal erectors, you may find it's easier to also draw your back ribs up at the same time. The levator costalis are pretty close to the spinal erectors, and those are the muscles you're trying to activate to create sensation at the back of the rib cage. Now, more than just a breathing exercise, one of the reasons that I teach all of this stuff, even in parts, is to learn how to operate the rib cage. Now, if you lift the front, sides, and back of the rib cage, and that can be an exercise, so front, side, back to the rib cage, lift, lower, but do it slowly and smoothly. The idea then is to sort of lift your ribs and find an intermediate position, one where you're not lifted all the way up, but not sagging down. So there's a lift, there's sensation throughout the rib cage, so you can feel your entire rib cage. You can think of it as creating tension in the spaces between the ribs. The connective tissue has a little bit of tension, enough to give you an awareness of your entire rib cage. You could think of that as stabilizing the rib cage, and this is excellent if you're doing any sort of movement that involves the shoulders, particularly if you're doing downward dog or whether you're doing warrior 1 or warrior 2 with the arms up. You can lift the rib cage so that the shoulder muscles have a firm foundation to work on the shoulders. Or if you're doing a handstand or downward dog where your arms are actually supporting the weight of your body, having a stable rib cage can make it easier for your shoulder muscles to support the shoulders, giving all of these muscles a stable foundation from which to work. Now, not only does lifting the rib cage, expanding the rib cage, make the rib cage stable, if you draw the ribs away from the pelvis, it also adds some tension to the midsection. So here I'm relatively relaxed. So like the weight of my abdominal organs are adding a bit of tension to my belly, but this is my abdomen engaged. This is relaxed. So there's tension, but it's more like the weight of my abdominal organs pressing out, adding tension to my belly, to the wall of my abdomen. But if I lift the ribs, I'm actually lengthening the abs without actually making them tense. And what that does is it gives a bit of sensitivity. And it's like tuning the strings of a guitar. You add just enough tension, not too tight because then you bend the guitar and make the sound too high pitched, not too loose, otherwise there's no sound. But if you have the sound just right, you can plug it and it makes the perfect sound. And same with lifting and lowering the ribs. You create just enough tension that you have a feel for your waist. And guess what? That makes it easy. You can then use minimal activation of your abs to move your rib cage, change it, or just hold it in position with minimum effort. So lifting and lowering the ribs. So lifting the ribs, keeping the ribs open, not only helps to stabilize your rib cage, making it easier to control the shoulders, also helps to stabilize or control your the relationship between your pelvis and rib cage, which also includes the lumbar spine. So with all of this activation, and again, this goes back to the idea of feeling the body, consciously feeling, being aware, and also responding to what you feel. So a lot of people can drive a car, and it's just sort of like slam on the brakes, slam on the accelerator, like it's all very unsmooth. And actually, this is something I learned from my dad. He told me that he would feel the pressure in his foot as he adjusted the amount of pressure on the accelerator, so like very slight and smooth, so the speed changes, so you could maintain a comfortable speed even if the road went up and down, or you could change speed very smoothly and comfortably. And that's the same thing you can do with your body. The better you are at feeling your body and controlling it, it's not just okay, I've got control and then forget about it. It's like you can monitor the way you move your body, and you can make all of your movements, when you're paying attention, smooth and connected, and you can maintain the feeling in your body. So the idea is to maintain, like tuning a guitar, keeping it in tune. So keep your body in tune so you can always feel it. So if there's slackness, say in the waist or the ribs, or there's a lack of feeling, you can create space. So you create just enough tension that you have a feel for your body. And that's sort of like this final point. So rather than just lifting the ribs, so I suggested earlier, you lift the ribs, it's not all the way up. It's just enough that there's a nice feeling of tension, not too much, not too little, in the rib cage, so you have a feeling for it, and you can also control it easily. Likewise with lifting the ribs, enough tension in your abs that you can feel it and control it easily. So it doesn't have to be like this all the time. I'll keep my abs engaged. It's like it's a relaxed, minimal effort. And then the final thing, and this can happen in many poses, particularly when you're not excessively back bent or forward bent, but say something like Warrior One, where your arms are reaching over your head, or even Downward Dog, where your arms are supporting your body, or even handstand. But in any sort of spine relatively neutral pose, and I don't like the word neutral, I'm not here advising you to keep your spine neutral all of the time, but what I would suggest instead, if you lift and expand your rib cage so that your rib cage has a little bit of tension, so that your waist has a bit of tension, in any pose you can then make any adjustments, and these can be exercises in themselves. You can try tilting the rib cage slightly forward or back. When I tilt forward, it opens the back of my body a bit more. If I tilt back, it opens the front. I can find the position where there's even sensation in the front and the back of the body. Likewise, I can adjust that tilt for my abs as well. So here it feels like my front's a little bit more tense. Now it feels like sensation here, and here's a bit more even. You can do rib cage slides like this, moving my rib cage one way or the other. So then there again, not like this, first lifting, and then sliding side to side so I can feel even tension in the sides of my waist. You can do the same thing front to back. Okay, there, it feels comfortable. And the idea of all of this, and you can work on, if you can do it in a standing pose or a seated pose, feeling your body. So if you can adjust tension in a relatively easy pose, say mountain pose with your feet apart or together, it's then that much easier to work on that same sort of sensitivity and awareness in poses of gradually increasing difficulty. So you start with an easy pose, feel and adjust your body so it feels right. Then you work on steadily more difficult poses, either within the same workout or say working towards poses that you can't do currently, but you're gradually working towards them. You can work on that same awareness and sensitivity. And it's not just the spine, like the focus here was on the body, but that same awareness can apply to the shoulders, moving shoulders forward and back so that the shoulder blades feel seated comfortably. And it can also apply to the hips, perhaps rolling the legs in and out, tilting the pelvis forward and back. And that's another action that you can use. Might be easier with the knees bent, but once your waist and your rib cage are set, you could try also tilting your pelvis one way forward or back. See if that changes the sensation in your lumbar spine, even side to side. And if you have imbalances, another thing to be aware of is twisting. Twist your rib cage relative to your pelvis, or twist your pelvis relative to your rib cage and your legs. So as you get more and more used to this, you'll start to find the imbalances in your bodies, and you can work on adjusting your body so that you minimize those imbalances. So two general principles I would suggest. In the beginning, it started off with a breathing exercise or moving exercise. Open, create space, and then relax. And those would be the two principles you could practice, like in any movement. If you're doing a movement slowly and smoothly to feel your body, if it's an isolation movement, focus on opening, creating space, lengthening, and then relaxing. Those can be the two extremes. Try to maximally relax, try to create as much space as you can, and that will give you a feeling of your body. Then when you're moving towards a still point in between those two extremes, it can be, how do I balance maximum space and maximum relaxation? So it's not like this, which is maximum space. It's not like this. It is somewhere in between. And that, I would suggest, is something that you can work towards in any yoga pose for your entire body. Can you make your spine maximally long and maximally relaxed? Can you find the middle point between that? Same with the shoulders. Can you create as much space in the shoulders, both up and down, perhaps laterally as well? And the idea of creating space and length, is it creates tension or it adds tension. And the relaxation part is a lack of tension. So it's basically what you're doing by creating space, by creating the balance between maximum length and maximum relaxation, is you're finding just the right amount of tension that you can comfortably feel your body and also control it. Hope that was helpful. Hopefully that was not too long-winded. I'll probably do a write-up for this as well, so if you want to read it so you can absorb the information in another way. And thanks for watching. Namaste.